Good morning. Good to see all of you this morning. To our online community, we thank you for tuning in, as always, to be with us. We're thankful that the rain has stopped and that hopefully you're enjoying some sunshine, and that just as it is warm outside, you will be filled with the warmth of God on the inside for having been here today. Just a couple of announcements as we get started. A reminder that our middle school and high schoolers, our Friday night youth meeting, Aftershock, is resuming this Friday at 7 o'clock right next door in the Children's Ministry Center. So Friday at 7, if you're a middle schooler, high schooler, that is resuming as it is safe to do so. We're trying to take everything and put it back running after the COVID times, and we believe now is a good time to resume our youth meetings on Friday night, so that's 7 to 8:30. So it's an hour and a half, just like the little kids get right next door, which is a segue into my second announcement, which is a reminder, Children's Church is happening right now. It's concurrent with service, so it's right next door for ages 4 to 10. So if you're 4 to 10 and want to learn about HELP, they have been learning some cool things this quarter, I believe. They've had a fireman, they've had a policeman, they've had a service dog, they've had all sorts of stuff going on over there. And they get snacks. So if I see any of you coming back with little things, I'll know where you were visiting. Yes, I know it's true, we won't be offering snacks here, but the kids get them. They're right next door. Make sure that the kids get on over there and enjoy themselves. Third one is a second and final reading for transfer of membership in to the church here, and you would think I would have written down now how to properly pronounce it after last week, but I didn't. I'm a mess. If my wife doesn't keep me organized, I forget to do that. So I'm still reading off the original sheet, but this is the second and final reading for Marie Romero and Elijah Hennaday from the Greenville Spanish Church. This is the second reading for their membership in. And then Danny and Monica Long, right, or Gabriella Monica, that's her middle name, Long from the Pickens SDA Church transferring in. So all of those who would be in favor of supporting them in that move and keeping them accountable on their walk with Jesus here as a member of our community, let me see the raising of hands to welcome them in. All righty, they are in. We will consider that. You're already family, I'm just warning you. Once you've been here first time, you're a visitor. Second time, you're family. This is just the bureaucratic mess that means now I have ways to call you. No, now people won't sign up, right? No, they're like, I won't transfer. I don't want him to be able to call me. Anyway, that is all the announcements. Oh, one more. Actually, some of you, as you walk in, you will notice the mountains are starting to go in. So if you looked and you said, why is there a big giant arrow on the wall? That's not going to be an arrow. That's actually going to be the mountainscape. Really fancy, but it's taking time to stain boards and all of that because it's had a lot of moisture in the air the last week, lots of rain. So we've been a little delayed on that. But if you wondered why the arrow, it will be a mountain eventually. So thank you for your patience there with that. And I want to thank Eric Clary and his brother who have been working tirelessly to do that. So just thought I'd point that out if you're like, what's up? So anyway, we're glad you're here. Let's bow our heads and ask the Lord to be with us today. Father, we thank you for the opportunity to be here this morning. We thank you that for whatever reason you have brought us here, and we ask that we would see you clearly. May all that is said and done here bring glory and honor to you, for we ask it in your name. Amen.
Well, good morning. It's such a delight to worship with this family of God today. I appreciate Kayla asking me if I could fill in for them today, and it's just an honor to be here. We're going to have the first song be one I'm sure we're very familiar with, How Great Is Our God. But I was reading up on the backstory of this song. Where did it come from? What scripture was used? And Chris Tallman said that it was from Psalms 104. I'm just going to read a very brief amount of that, just to kind of set the tone of the song. And it is a praise song of 104. Let all that I am praise the Lord. O Lord my God, how great you are. You are robed with honor and majesty. You are dressed in a robe of light. You stretch out the starry curtain of the heavens. You lay out the rafters of your home in the rain clouds. You make the clouds your chariots, and you ride upon the wings of the wind. The winds are your messengers. Flames of fire are your servants. You place the world on its foundation. so it would never be moved. How great is our God? I mean, that's just a little tidbit, isn't it? I mean, he is just so awesome. So if you'll stand with me, we will sing together our praise to the Lord, declaring his greatness. The splendor of the King, clothed in majesty, let all the earth rejoice, let all the earth rejoice. He wraps himself in light, and darkness tries to hide. It trembles at his voice, it trembles at his voice. Well, how great is our God? Sing with me, how great is our God? And all will see how great is our God. Age to age he stands, and time is in his hand, beginning and the end, beginning and the end. The Godhead three in one, Father, Spirit, Son, the Lion and the Lamb, the Lion and the Lamb. How great is our God? Sing with me, how great is our God? And all will see how great is our God. Name above all names. Name above all names. Worthy of all praise. My heart will sing, how great is our God. Name above all names. Name above all names, worthy of all praise. My heart will sing, how great is our God. How great is our God? Sing with me, how great is our God? And all will see how great is our God. Amen. You may be seated.
Good morning, everyone. Happy Sabbath. We're glad to be in the house of the Lord this morning to worship Him in spirit and truth. Let's open our hearts with Him. For the prayer, I have some requests. Deborah wants us to pray for good ultrasound results. Probably the ultrasound will be done near future. We pray that God may heal whatever, so the ultrasound will be negative. I have one here that asks for total deliverance and restoration for my entire bloodline. I ask that you stand in agreement with me for the glorious gospel of Jesus, to pierce it through every veil of deception on my mom, dad, and brother, and for complete healing over my son Theos. I have another one that I'm not able to read. So if you put this in the box, write another one clear. We can pray over it next week. Because I can make some words, but I cannot understand what it says. We have some people in our church that needs our prayer. We have shut-ins. We have people that are sick with cancer. And we all need prayer. Even if you're healthy, in good shape, you still need the help of the Lord. And as we do that this morning, I will invite you to kneel with me, and we go to the Lord in prayer. Our Heavenly Father, our great God, Creator of the universe, and the Redeemer of the mankind. We come to your house of prayer this morning on your holiday as your children, bought by the blood of Jesus, to worship you in spirit and truth. First, we want to ask you, Father, to forgive us, because we know our weaknesses, and we know your holiness. But in your love, grace, and mercy, you are patient with us. You forgive us. So we ask you to forgive us and to help us. We thank you greatly, Father, for the gift of Jesus Christ, our Savior. He gave himself for us that we may live forever, eternally. And having the certainty of salvation in Jesus, we come to worship you, to give you honor and glory, because you deserve it as our Creator and our Redeemer. We come together in unity to fellowship. So we place ourselves in your hands this morning, Father, as well as these requests, that you will answer according to your will and help us according to your will. Sometimes, Father, we know you may not answer us the way we ask or the time that we desire your answer. But we are grateful that you hear us and answer according to your wisdom. Bless this morning and bless the message that will be presented by your servant. And open our hearts and give us your Holy Spirit in great measure, that we may understand and we may continue to grow in Jesus, to grow in knowledge, to grow in giving up our faults, and to embrace your power. In Jesus' name, amen.
If you will stand with me, we will sing, "Great is His faithfulness." Our Father is so faithful to us. He is so good. Just thank you, Jesus. Great is thy faithfulness, O God, my Father. may be seated.
The reading of the scripture this morning from the Old Testament is in Ezekiel chapter 33, verses 10 and 11. Therefore, you, O Son of Man, say to the house of Israel, thus you say, if our transgressions and our sins lie upon us, and we pine away in them, how can we then live? Say to them, as you live, says the Lord God, I have no pleasure in the death of the wicked, but that the wicked turn from his way and live. Turn from your evil ways. For why should you die, O house of Israel? And we go to the New Testament, to the Gospel of Luke, chapter 9. Luke chapter 9, we read from verse 51 to 56. Now it came to pass, when the time had come for him to be received up, that he steadfastly set his face to go to Jerusalem, and sent messengers before his face. And as they went, they entered a village of the Samaritans to prepare for him. But they did not receive him, because his face was set for the journey to Jerusalem. And when his disciples, James and John, saw this, they said, Lord, do you want us to command fire to come down from heaven and consume them just as Elijah did? But he turned and rebuked them and said, you do not know what manner of spirit you are of. For the Son of Man did not come to destroy men's lives, but to save them. And they went to another village. May the Lord bless the reading of his words.
Good morning, everyone. Good to see all of you today. And I'm not going to embarrass them, but a dear friend of mine is here today, and he honors me greatly with his presence. And I just narrowed it down. You can look at all the men in here. But thank you so much for being here. It means a lot. And that being said, we are continuing today in our series in the book of Genesis. And today we hit one of those chapters that, I will be honest, when you know it's coming up in the timeline, you at first get a little bit hesitant, because it is a chapter that has been widely misunderstood, widely abused, and to be frank, it's one of the few chapters in the Bible I think is used for great evil today. And the one I'm talking about is the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah in chapter 19 of Genesis. And so today we are going to be approaching that subject, hopefully with humility, hopefully with an open mind, and we're going to be looking at the main 2 points, really, of this chapter, and it may not be the points you think it is. In fact, I'm going to guarantee for the majority of us, the point of chapter 19 is not what you think it is. And we're going to have to look at a character that, as we've said before, he's come up twice already in the narrative as a distraction to our main character. And our main character is a guy named Abram, who became Abraham, right? And we remember Lot has caused him nothing but grief. And by the time they finally separated, it's one distraction after another. Lot got himself in trouble when he was with Abram. Now that he departed company, remember, he ends up in this valley and in the middle of a political nightmare and gets captured in the middle of that 5 versus 4 king battle. Abram now has to go rescue Lot. And now the third time Lot's going to come in is another devolution from the story. Now Lot needs some really big saving. And this time, not even Abraham can save him in that sense, but Abraham has a friend and that friend is going to save in spite of Lot. But enough of that be said. We're going to dive right in. So before I begin, I'm going to take a moment and kneel here on the platform and ready myself before God. I want to invite you where you are, if you would just bow your heads and ask the Lord to speak to your heart individually, that your heart would be open, that your mind would be receptive to the message God has tailor-prepared for you in the Spirit today. Pray for those around you that they would also receive a blessing. And go ahead and pray that I would be hidden behind the text and it would be God's words and not mine. And after a few moments of silence, I'll bring us together out loud in a close of that prayer, and we will get started with our message this morning. Genesis 19, the outcry of compromise. So let's just take a moment and go before the Lord in prayer. Father, today we approach a passage that is troubling for many reasons. But we come in faith knowing that if it is troubling, it must not be because of you, but because of something or someone else. And we ask that you would show us clearly the difference between yourself and the other, between good and evil. That, Spirit, you would revive our senses, that we would see you clearly, and we would learn to love as a result. May the same Spirit that inspired these words now instruct us to their meaning, for we ask them in your name. Amen. You have your Bibles, digital or physical copies. Turn with me to Genesis, the 19th chapter. Genesis, the 19th chapter, we're going to dive right in. You'll remember last week at the end of 18, it ended with Abraham, standing in a kind of judgment before God, asking him about sparing the city, because God has said, can I keep from Abraham what I am about to do? And he has visited with him, and now he has told him that he goes, I am going to destroy, No, that's not what he said. Aha, see, I'm paying attention. He didn't say, I'm going to destroy. He said, I am going to examine the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah and see what I shall do. And then Abraham begins this engagement with God. He brings his questions to God, and he asks him, he goes, well, would you spare it for 50? Would you spare it for 45? Would you spare it for 40? Then he keeps realizing that while God's mercy is great, Abraham's conception of the evil of the city is not great enough, and he begins dropping in his little bargaining chip, and he gets it all the way down to 10, and at 10, something dawns on Abraham that with how quick God is to say he would spare, that if the city is not spared, it will not be because God wants it gone. It'll be because there is no one left righteous in this place. And remember what we said last time, and it's a poignant moment that needs to stick in our minds before we begin this chapter, because the author of Genesis is moving with it. People say, well, Abraham must have lost his nerve. Why did he stop at 10? Couldn't he have dropped to 6 at least, which is the amount of Lot's family, as we will see? But it's not that Abraham lost his nerve with God. It's that in that moment we saw in the text when read appropriately, Abraham realizes not even Lot would make it. And you're going to see some evidence as to why Abraham would realize that about Lot, that short only of God, Lot would not even count as righteous. And some of you go, oh, now wait, but the Bible says, we'll get to that. Right, let's dive in. Chapter 19, starting in verse 1. The outcry of compromise. Now the two angels came to Sodom in the evening, as Lot was what? Sitting in the gate of Sodom. When Lot saw them, he rose to meet them and bowed down with his face to the ground. Pause. Oh, right off the bat, something powerful. Where is Lot sitting? Okay, at the gate of Sodom. Now, I need to explain this phrase because to us, we're like, okay, he's sitting at a gate. To the Hebrew mind, this is a very specific phrase. To say he is sitting in the gate of Sodom, the entrance to the city is where leaders would sit to help answer questions or to resolve issues or to welcome people of importance. The point is this: Lot is now sitting in the place of leadership. Keep that in your mind. Because I want you to notice something. Lot already, before the story begins, Lot is already the poster child of compromise. You go, what am I talking about? Well, you might remember in chapter 13 and verse 12, when it says that Lot first saw the valley that Sodom sat in, and he chose it for himself, right? It says that he first settled in a city of the valley, and then it says he kept moving his tent all the way to Sodom. You get this idea of someone who started on the edge of the valley, then was like, nope, I want to get closer. Nope, I want to get closer. Nope, I want to get closer, to the point where he's right up on the outskirts of the town. Well then, right, and I would point out that the very next verse in chapter 13 says that even at that time, the city is described as wicked exceedingly and sinners against the Lord. So it's not like that wouldn't have been visible to anybody who chose to reside there, who would pay attention. Now you go to the very next chapter in 14, and when Lot is captured by these victorious kings in that war that takes place, it says at that point he's living in Sodom. So now he's not just in the plain, in a city. He's not just somewhere near. He's not just in the outskirts. He's moved in, right? But then it's interesting that in chapter 18, the chapter right before this, it says that now not only are they wicked exceedingly and sinners against the Lord, their sin now is exceedingly grave. It's escalating. Things are getting worse and worse and worse. And now even more of an insight. I want you to pause right here. If you have some way to mark this, we're going to jump somewhere really quick because I need you to have one more insight into Lot's mind as he's in Sodom. Keep your finger here. Turn to 2 Peter chapter 2 for just a moment. 2 Peter chapter 2 for just a moment. The Bible gives us insight into Lot's frame of mind in Sodom. I don't know if you knew this. 2 Peter chapter 2, starting in verse 6. So 2 Peter, that's near the end of your Bible. If you hit Revelation and hook a left, you should find it pretty quickly. 2 Peter chapter 2, starting in verse 6. And we're jumping into the middle of a thought here right after Peter has talked about the flood, the other destruction story in Genesis that bothers people. All right, and here he goes. Look at this, verse 6. And if he, that being God, condemned the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah to destruction by reducing them to ashes, having made them an example to those who would live ungodly lives thereafter. And if he, that being God, rescued righteous who? Lot. Okay, here's the righteous terminology, but don't let that distract you. Pay attention to what it says about righteous Lot. Oppressed by the sensual conduct of unprincipled men. For by what he saw and heard, that righteous man, while living among them, felt his righteous soul, what's the next word? Yeah, or in the modern English, tormented day after day by their lawless deeds. Right? Now, I don't know if you pay close attention to what it's saying there. These are strong words. Lot felt oppressed by what was around him. Have you ever felt oppressed? Do you know that feeling? Like just a really bad, like you're just so uncomfortable, you're just not sure, it's like a weight. It says not only was he oppressed, but his soul was tormented. That's a very strong, agonizing sense, right? It was tormented by what he saw, what he heard, maybe what he was participating in, and it says day after day after day. And the reason why I want this in your mind is to think about this. Lot is sitting where? At the gate. Not only has he begun several chapters ago on the outside of the city, in some other city, and then moved closer and closer and closer to the edge of Sodom. Then he was in Sodom. Now he's risen to prominence in Sodom, and here's why this matters. He's risen to prominence in Sodom at the same time it says he's tormented in his soul by what he sees, and he feels oppressed by the evil that he is experiencing. And my point is, how can you feel that much oppression? How can you feel that much anguish and torment of soul and yet rise to prominence in that environment? Anyone thought about that? We're quick to go, well, he must have been. No, hold on. This story will do anything but prove that Lot is not righteous. There's a reason why he's called that, but sneak peek, that was why Abraham gets called that too in Romans 4. Follow me here. He's risen to prominence. He doesn't just stay, he rises. And you get the idea that compromise wears him down. It deadens the senses. It ruins his core. And we're going to see that. He's now at the gate. Go back to Genesis 19. Oppressed and tormented Lot is at the gate doing his job. And here comes these heavenly beings. Verse 2. He sees them, and he said, "Now behold, my lords, please turn aside into your servant's house and spend the night. Wash your feet, then you may rise early and go on your way." And they said, however, "No, we will spend the night in the square." You get the idea that Lot is very troubled by that statement. Verse 3, "Yet he urged them strongly. So they turned aside to him and entered his house, and he prepared a feast for them and baked unleavened bread, and they ate." Now this is interesting. He's moved from a tent to a house. Just want to point that out. He's put roots down in this place. All right, nothing against houses. I'm just saying he's rooted here. And again, it's interesting. The angels come in the evening, and Lot has this sense of urgency about him that when the visitors say, I think intentionally, "No, we'll stay outside," you get the idea that Lot is extremely troubled by that thought. And it says he strongly begs them almost, just pleads with them, no, don't stay outside. Why his urgency? Well, he knows what's going on. I don't know if he knew what was about to come in the very next verse, but you get the idea that what comes in the next verse might have been a regular occurrence. I mean, if he's a leader, after all, he would know some of the things that happen in his city. And there's something about these visitors saying, "No, we'll stay out here," that Lot gets the idea, this is not a town you want to be outside when the sun goes down. Please do not stay out here. It will not end well. Right? He has some urgency about it. Now, by the way, hospitality is not an unusual thing in Lot's day. So before we're like, see, look how nice he's being hospitable. No, leaders would do that. Heads of families would do that, even though Hebrews 13:2 does say, "Be quick to entertain strangers, for you might entertain angels unaware." But he doesn't know they're angels, and I'm not going to say he does it just because of these two. I think he would have done that. You get an idea that he's at the gate, maybe trying to continually grab visitors that may not know. But then verse 4, and this is where the story starts going downhill quick. "Before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, surrounded the house, both" what? "Old and young." Okay, I'm going to come back to that. "Old and young, all the people from every quarter. And they called to Lot and said to him, 'Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us that we may know them.'" Some might say carnally, some might say that we have relations to them. It depends on how your translator wants to do that. Okay, I'm not going to go into depth on that at this moment, but I'm just going to say all the young and the old. This isn't just adults, this is kids too, young people. They all collectively come, and trigger alert if any of this is going to bother you. I'm trying not to be crude, but they all come to rape the men. That is their intent. They have come to do that. And by the way, as I said, this might have even been a common occurrence. I don't know, because this might explain some of the urgency of Lot trying to get them in. So now this is a really bad situation. They've all come and said, "Throw them out here, our turn." Oh, gross. Verse 6, "But Lot went out to them at the doorway and shut the door behind him and said, 'Please, my brothers, do not act wickedly.'" And now we all say, what an honorable man to stand up to them. Righteous Lot looking. Well, you might say that until the next verse. Verse 8, "Now behold, I have 2 daughters who have not had relations with a man. Please let me bring them out to you and do with them whatever you would like. Only do nothing to these men inasmuch as they have come under the shelter of my roof." Yeah, Father of the Year, someone says. Yes. Okay, well, yes, and I do want to point this out, though. He basically goes outside. You go, yes, here's the hero Lot. And he goes, don't take the guys. Take my kids. Take my kids. Do unspeakable things to them. They're just women. Right, here's the thing. It's true that the culture of the time said that you had to protect visitors under your roof as if they were your own family. But I want you to note something. Protect them as if they were your own what? Family. Now what is he doing to his family or willing to do to his family? Offering them up to the wolves. Okay, what parent is comfortable with this? Anybody? Yeah, not. Okay, and here's why I'm pointing this out. Before we're quick to be like, look at the righteous guy trying to save his friends. Here's the thing. His living in Sodom has so desensitized his standard of good and evil that he is perfectly comfortable sacrificing his kids for something. To a mob he knows they are going to do unspeakable and evil things to. What has happened to this man? You ever thought about that? What has happened to his sense of good and evil that he thinks it is a just, righteous, laudable thing for a leader to take your own kids and throw them out there to who knows what? But I protected my visitors. I'm sorry, I'm just going to be fair right now. This sounds horrible as a minister to say. But if it came up to protecting a visitor under my roof or my kids, you're toast. I'm just letting you know now. I will pray for you. I will wish you well. I will try and find a way to get you away from the crowd, but I ain't sacrificing my kids for you. I might sacrifice me for you, but I ain't sacrificing my kids. If Lot had been like, take me, okay, because maybe he knows, you could argue he knows where he's going. He's assured of salvation. Whatever. No. He's like, take them. No. As you said, Parent of the Year award? I think not. Okay, but it gets worse. So he offers this horrific thing, and look at verse 9. But they said, stand aside. Furthermore, they said, this one came into us as a foreigner, and already he is acting like a judge. Now we will treat you worse than them. So they pressed hard against Lot and came near to break the door. Okay, a couple statements about this verse right off the bat. First of all, it's interesting that he goes, okay, don't have the men, have these women. And their response is, that won't cut it. Stand aside. That won't satisfy us enough. Now, the reason I point this out is this. Have you ever noticed that sin only satisfies for a season? That you have a little bit of it, and then you need more and more and more and more and more and more extreme more to try and get the same feeling of excitement and pleasure that you had before. Has anyone noticed that? And it's gotten to the point where these guys are offered two people. It'd still be two women, all this, and they're like, that won't be enough for us. That won't satisfy us. And say what you will about, the evil that's happening here, but what it tells me is when it gets to the point that doing unspeakable things even to these women, that won't be enough. How much sin have you been doing that won't satisfy? They're like, nope, that won't do. And then a couple other interesting things that should start going on your mental shelf for later. Then they make fun of Lot, but they make fun of him very specifically. Yeah, this foreigner came in here and tries to act like a judge. Well, it seems like he was in some sort of judge-like position because he's allowed to sit at the gate in prominence. But here's the thing. Again, just put it on your mental shelf. Their first insult to him is, you ain't from around here, boy. You a foreigner. You shouldn't be in this country. Okay, that's all I'm going to say on that. And then they say this gross thing. We will treat you worse than them. Okay, considering what they just said, how much, you know what, never mind. I don't want to know how much worse they could come up with. Hopefully that was just a turn of phrase. This is really bad. Now verse 10. So they're about to kill him and bust through the door of his house, verse 10. But the men, these heavenly beings, reached out their hands and brought Lot into the house with them and shut the door. By the way, this is Lot saved for the first time by the angels in this story. He would have died right there, I think, or something horrible would have happened to him at the door. But the angels reach out, somehow grab him out of the mob and shut the door in their face. Okay? Now verse 11, this is very key. Then they, that being the angels, these two men, they struck the men who were at the doorway of the house with what? Blindness, both small and great, so that they what? Wearied themselves trying to find the door. Okay, pay close attention to these two details. This is very important. They struck them with blindness. So now they're blind, now they can't see. But even though they're blind, what are they still trying to do? They're still trying to get in. They're still trying to find the door. And there's a couple of things here that I don't want us to miss because this story is very instructive to a lot of things, especially when it comes to judgment, God's interaction with evil, this kind of thing. Follow me here. The intervention of God already is in keeping with the choices that have been made by the individuals being judged. You're like, whoa, that's a mouthful. Let me explain this again. God now is going to miraculously step in to save Lot, correct? Right? He would have died right there, so they go in and pull him in, and then to buy time, they blind everybody. But here's the interesting thing about this. The miraculous intervention of God in the blindness does nothing to inhibit the choices of the ones being judged. Is anyone following me here? What did they want to do before the judgment? Rape the visitors. They wanted to get in the house, right? What do they want to do after the judgment? The same thing. Has their minds changed at all? No, and this is very key. The Lord doesn't change anybody's mind. Okay? He doesn't turn them into robots. He doesn't enslave them and just now you're trapped. You do only as I say, robot of whatever. When God steps in, it's always according to the choices. It's always respecting the choices that have been made by free will volitional beings, whether good or bad. And I find it fascinating that even as he's launching a judgment, as we see so many times with the judgment of God, his judgments are always efforts to try and get you to change your mind before he gets to the step of changing your life. You know what I'm talking about here? In other words, he does something to delay them. He does something to hope they would change their mind. But here's the thing. God can judge, but he can't change your character. Not without your choice to do so. And these people have already made up their minds what their character is, and no amount of judgment of God is going to change what they've decided to be. He judges them, and they're still the same people they were before the judgment. That needs to go on your mental shelf somewhere. It's going to be key because Revelation uses a lot of imagery from this chapter. The idea that when God judges, these people are still the same people they were before he judged. And they're the same after, and that causes some problems. Right? So he strikes them with blindness. But note, their free will is maintained. But sadly, even in their free will, they're obsessed with evil. Even after a judgment, they're obsessed with evil. Verse 12. Then the two men said to Lot, "Whom else do you have here? Son-in-law, your sons, your daughters, and whomever you have in the city, bring them out of this place. For we are about to destroy this place because their" what? "Outcry has become so great before the Lord that the Lord has sent us to destroy it." Okay, this is the key part of the chapter we've got to explain, or you will misunderstand what's about to happen. This is the third time we have seen this phrase come up in the last couple chapters. Because their outcry has become so great before the Lord. We saw outcry 3 times. Twice with God talking to Abraham, "Should I hide what I'm about to do?" And Abraham told him the first time, he goes, "Their outcry has come before me. I'm going to see if it is indeed great." Then he tells him again, he goes, "The outcry, I'm going to see if they have done according to that outcry." And then now we see it again. The outcry has become so great. Now I need to explain this word outcry, because for those of you who speak other languages, you're going to know this elemental truth. Some words are so nuanced in your language, they don't translate as clearly into another one. Does anyone know what I'm talking about here? Right, so you can say the word, and people can basically understand, but there's a lot more depth to that usage of the word. Well, in Hebrew, this is the same thing. The word outcry here, it is outcry, so the Bible translated it right. But here's the thing. It is a very complex word, okay? It's za'aka, okay? Ooh, I like the phlegm in my mouth. Za'aka, right? Yeah, trying to get my Hebrew going. Here's the thing for outcry, and here's what it means. I want you to pay close attention because this is the word that God says why all this is about to happen, because of the za'aka. Here it is. Za'aka means the anguished cry of the oppressed, the agonized plea of a victim for help in some great injustice. More than that, these pleas, the word says, it's rooted in the plight inflicted on someone else, of a heinous moral and social corruption, of an arrogant disregard for elementary human rights, and a cynical insensitivity to the suffering of others. That was a mouthful. I need to say it again. 3 times God has said the whole reason something's about to happen to Sodom is because of the outcry that has come before me. I'm going to say again what that word means for outcry. It's the anguished cry of the oppressed, the agonized plea of a victim for help in the midst of some great injustice. And that cry is grounded in a plight being inflicted on them by others of heinous moral and social corruption, of an arrogant disregard for elementary human rights, and a cynical insensitivity to the suffering of others. I know that's a mouthful. I'm going to have to repeat it again and again, but in case you didn't know Hebrew, and you were unable to know the word because you go, well, Pastor, I would never be able to figure that out. I don't know. Well, good things for you is that the Bible, in another passage, tells you basically the same thing without you having to know this word. You go, what? I'm so glad you asked. Pause here, one last verse. Turn back to Ezekiel chapter 16, or actually in this case, hook to the right because we're at the beginning. Ezekiel 16, the prophet Ezekiel is going to say that word in clearer words for you to communicate the same thing. Ezekiel 16, we're going to begin in verse 48. It's right before the book of Daniel, the prophet Daniel, if you know that. Ezekiel 16, look at verse 48. As I live, declares the Lord God, Sodom, there's that city, your sister and her daughters have not done as you and your daughters have done. He's talking to Israel. Behold, this was the guilt of your sister Sodom. Oh, good, he's going to spell it out for us if we missed it. She and her daughters had what? Pride or arrogance, an abundance of food and careless ease, but she did not what? Help the poor and the needy. Thus they were haughty and committed abominations before me. Therefore I removed them when I saw it. I want you to pay close attention to what the prophet Ezekiel says. He says they were arrogant, they were full of pride, haughty, they had abundance food, they were careless in ease. You might could say they had an indifference. And he said because of that, they had an indifference, right, to the poor and needy. And because of that, they committed heinous and morally reprehensible acts in their leisure. Is anyone noticing the same thing as the word zacha here? Anyone seeing the different elements of it? The idea of heinous moral and social corruption, arrogant disregard for elementary human rights, a cynical insensitivity to the suffering of others. Is anyone seeing the same thing right here? I need to know that you know this because this is very key to unpacking this chapter. That's the outcry that has come before the Lord. And the reason I have to point this out is this, because we do need to explain this. One more thing here. Well, I'm just going to stick to the point. I'm going to see how much trouble I can get into. Okay? Contrary to popular teaching in the church, okay, this story is not about LGBTQ+. Okay, now everyone's going to stone me. Now, there are passages about it in Scripture, and that is a sermon for another time, and I'm happy to have that discussion. But the point of the story in chapter 19 of Genesis is not homosexuality. It's not sex. In fact, spoiler alert, we're going to see in a moment, this story is bookended by two horrendous sexual acts. One, the attempted homosexual rape that we just read about, and at the end of the chapter, an incestuous heterosexual rape. Both are made fun of in this chapter as being evil and morally wrong. This chapter is not about LGBTQ+, and I'm just going to go out on a limb and say this, right? The fact that we make it about them is proof that we are Sodom. You're like, what? This is the part where you're going to really hate me, but the text says it. This is how I know we are Sodom. Because we would rather point to a minority, no matter how good or bad their life is, we would rather point to the minority in our haughty arrogance and go, these evil people, this is why God wiped them out, instead of pointing the finger back at the fact that we are prideful and arrogant and guilty of heinous moral and intellectual corruption, even in the name of God, to the point that we ignore the plight of the poor and the needy, and we do untold abominations before the Lord, and yet we are content to picket funerals and attack people on the media and go, it's the gays. Folks, when I read about outcry, in fact, I'll give you one more nuance about the term outcry. In the Hebrew mind, outcry was a technical legal term used by one suffering great injustice and appealing to the protection of the legal community. And yet all three times outcry has come up in Genesis 18 and 19, it's come from somewhere other than God. it hints at the idea that God's not the one bringing this accusation against Sodom. It's the people in Sodom, the oppressed, pleading to a higher power, pleading for some justice to be done in a world where justice has fallen on deaf ears in the human justice system, where justice is not being done, where corruption is so bad among the leadership, which would include Lot, by the way, so bad among the leadership, so bad among society, so bad in its evil, they have to plead somewhere. If the courts won't help them, if human justice fails them, if there is no righteousness in the land, then they have to appeal somewhere, and their outcry rises to God, and you get the idea that God is even hesitant to get involved in this way, but finally he's forced to act because he has no choice. No one there is going to deal with it, he has to. And the reason why this scares me is that so many preachers, so many people, it's so easy. We go to this chapter and we pick on a minority in society. And again, I'm not making a statement about lifestyles or not, but I'm saying we immediately jump on them instead of jump on us. Because when I read about what the Bible says Sodom's sins were, that sounds like the West, my friends. It's not a popular thing to say, and I love this country, but I'm going to be honest with it. My heavenly home is more important to me. But I'm just saying, this idea that we would have a society inflicting so much on others, that there would be a heinous moral and social corruption, an arrogant disregard for elementary human rights, and a cynical insensitivity to the suffering of others. Well, it'd happen anyway. That happens. It doesn't, blah, blah. Folks, all I have to do is turn on the TV to see that. In fact, I don't even have to turn on the TV. The thing that scares me most as a minister about COVID is not whatever conspiracy you think happened or what you think the government's done. It's watching even Christians and how they treat each other now. Remember how it said both old and young surrounded the house? I mean, just this week, one of the most disturbing things I saw was the clip, supposedly, of that school shooting in Texas. Did anyone see any of that? Where the kids were literally punching each other and throwing themselves into walls or whatever before, that's the fight that broke out, apparently, that, investigators think before one of them starts shooting. We live in a society so angry and so arrogant and so about me, and I, that every argument, even as church folk, that we make has less to do about anybody else or any sensitivity at all to anybody else's needs. It's all about me and my rights and my needs and my whatever. Friends, we are right in line with Sodom and fast going faster. And that scares me as a minister. Because the lessons of Scripture that were supposed to warn us of this and tell us where our dependence should be are ignored for a cheap political or religious point against a minority sexual group. Have I angered everybody yet? Take it up with the text, it's not me. Human justice has fallen on deaf ears. Do you think there's intraceable racism in this country? You better believe it. Don't think it's going to get so. Now, don't misunderstand me here, because now people go into the cynicism side. Well, then we might as well not try to fix anything. Right? Sometimes Adventists, we're guilty of this because we go, well, we know the Lord's coming back, going to burn it up anyway, so who cares? Folks, would I not want to try and slow the rate of decay? Would I not want to try and make it just a little bit better before he comes? I know I can't ultimately solve it, but what is sticking your head in the sand going to accomplish? That's that cynicism that Sodom was guilty of. It says it just has a cynical disregard for the plight of those that aren't you. It's not me. I'm getting by. And it's so sad because when it says the Lord has to respond to the outcry, it's not that he even wants to. If we had time, you could go to Hosea 11, verses 8 and 9, where in talking about Sodom and its destruction, God says, would I want to do that again? He said, my heart was turned over in me. My compassions were kindled within me. Deuteronomy 29:23 says that, about Sodom, that his righteous anger and his wrath at evil and suffering and injustice was warring against his desire never to lose anybody. You get the idea of a God that's torn within him, it's eating him up from the inside out, that he even has to step in and get involved in this story. That it's reached this point. That the injustice is so bad that no one will give a right. That now God will have to set it right. Verse 14 of Genesis 19. Lot went out, spoke to his sons-in-law, who were to marry his daughters. Now pause. Well, actually, I'll come back to that. who were to marry his daughters, and said, "Up, get out of this place, for the Lord will destroy the city." But he appeared to his sons-in-law to be what? Jesting, joking. This is so sad. Think about it. They think Lot is joking because apparently the life they've witnessed of Lot doesn't speak to him having strong convictions about anything. Remember how Peter said that his soul was tormented and he was oppressed day by day by what he saw, but he's risen to prominence? What kind of compromise do you have to do that? I'm not saying you have to compromise, but it's few and far. I'm sure people mean well. And he's compromised to the point that his own sons-in-law laugh, like, really, that you feel that strongly about something? You feel so strongly about how bad things are here in Sodom? That's funny, Pops. Never seen that before out of you. Do people laugh at us when we say we have strong convictions? I hope not. Verse 15. When morning dawned, the whole night's gone by. When morning dawned, the angels turned to Lot, saying, "Up, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, or you'll be swept away in the punishment of the city." But, this is a sad phrase, but he hesitated. So the men seized his hand and the hand of his wife and the hands of his 2 daughters, for the compassion of the Lord was upon him. And they brought him out and put him outside the city. He had the rest of the night to think about what's going on. He had all these experiences, and yet when push comes to shove, he still lingers. God specifically tells him, "Flee," and what is his response? A lack of urgency to obey the call of God. Why would he hesitate to obey God's command? Because his heart's still in Sodom. His heart's not with God, it's with the city. And not with the city in the sense of Abraham. Don't destroy the unrighteous. Lot's just thinking about him, and you know he's going to be thinking about him because it keeps going. And by the way, before I keep going, notice the only thing that's going to get Lot out. Did you already see the hint? The compassion of who? Of the Lord was upon him. Not Lot's righteousness, God's compassion. Did anyone pick that up? Yeah, not Lot's unfaithfulness, but God's faithfulness. It should be a theme you should have been seeing in Genesis. This is the only thing that's going to get Lot out. They have to drag him outside the city, or he would have just stayed in there till he just poof, vaporized. Right? They're like, nope, the compassion of God, because he's thinking about someone else, not just Lot. And he drags him outside, and now watch how much sadder this gets. Verse 17, when they had brought them outside, one of them said, "Escape for your life. Do not look behind you. Do not stay anywhere in the valley. Escape to the mountains, or you will be swept away." But Lot said to them, "No, my lords." What? God's like, do this. No. This is the righteous guy? God says, do. And he goes, no. Verse 19, "Behold your servant, if he's found favor in your sight." If you found favor in his sight? They already dragged you outside the city. They already saved you. "And if you have magnified your loving kindness, which you have shown me by saving my life," duh. "But I cannot escape to the mountains, for the disaster will overtake me and I will die. Now behold, this town is near enough to flee to, and it is small. Please let me escape there. Is it not small? That my life may be spared." This is really sad. First of all, even in the midst of God trying to save him, he can only think about himself and his abilities or lack thereof. Anyone notice that? I can't make it. I can't do it. I can't. What? In the midst of a crisis, your character will be revealed. And in the midst of a crisis, Lot is not righteous, he's selfish. In the midst of a crisis, Lot does not care about anybody but himself. Sodom's in Lot. I can't do that. No. And here's the sad thing. Look at what he turns back to. He starts trying to bargain with God to let him stay in a little city on the edge of the plain. You know what's sadder about this? We're going to see later in the Bible. The little city he wanted to go to, Zoar, is where he started this whole set of compromise years ago to start with. It's where he began to live in the valley before he kept moving, before he kept moving, before he kept moving, before he was in Sodom, and before he rose to prominence in it. He wants to go back to the beginning and hold on to an itty-bitty little bit of the evil that he likes? Do you notice how twice he goes, it's just tiny, it's just little, it's just a little thing? Does anyone notice him saying that over and over and over again? He wants to see what he can get away with God. What little thing of guilty, evil pleasure can I just hold on to and yet God be okay with me? Does anyone notice that? It's just a little thing. And this is such a miserable picture of this man. He has too much Sodom in him to be happy with God, and yet just enough of God not to be comfortable in Sodom. Does anyone notice that? I feel sorry for him. The Bible says he was tormented by what he saw. He had just enough God that he wasn't completely at ease in Sodom, but he had just enough Sodom in him. He was never really, truly just happy with God. You ever been there? You don't have to answer that. You ever been that miserable in your walk with God? Oh, but I want the... Oh, I hated it when I walked out of church. There was a time in my life I thought I could do that. I was like, well, God knows I love him. I don't need church. I can't live up to their standards. I can't do it. Out I went, and I can tell you had just enough God, I didn't enjoy the things all my friends were doing. Really, go get wasted? Really, go sleep around? I just couldn't bring myself to enjoy it, but I had just enough of the world in me. I didn't like church either. So you know what I'm talking about? It's a miserable place to be. I hate that. There's songs, and they're talking, and they're, you know, and it's a miserable place because you're just not happy anywhere. Lot's in the midst of a crisis, and he's bargaining because he's miserable. Oh, let me just keep one little thing. Verse 21, look at the goodness of God. He said to him, behold, I grant you this request also, not to overthrow the town of which you have spoken. Do you notice how fast, both with Abraham and Lot, God has immediately responded, I'll save, I'll save, I'll save, I'll save. Does anyone notice this? You should be noticing this. This isn't a desire of God to wipe the place out as much as he has to act. The outcry is too great. There is no more human route for salvation, no more human route to solve any of these problems. It's done for. Now he has to act, which, by the way, sneak peek, that's the same thing Revelation says. The earth will get so bad that no human justice will be able to be found down here. It will be so corrupt and so bad, there'll be no chance for the righteous to have anything done right for them, and so God has to act. Interestingly, with fire, the same way. Okay, anyway, just helps to read Genesis before you get to Revelation. Anyway, right? Boom. All right, so he goes, I'll spare that city for you. All right? But hurry and escape there, verse 22, for I cannot do anything until you arrive there. Therefore, the name of the town was called Zoar. Right? Again, the mercies of God, so quick and free. Verse 23, now the sun had risen over the earth, so it's like mid-morning, when Lot finally makes his rear end to Zoar. Then the Lord rained on Sodom and Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven. And he overthrew those cities and all the valley and all the inhabitants of the city and what grew on the ground. All right, so now justice is being executed. God's putting them out of their misery. It's nothing but misery in this place. God's basically, for lack of a better term, he's putting them to sleep. I know this is a very poor analogy, and my apologies to those of you like me who love animals, but if you've ever had an animal that's been hit by a car, sorry, trigger alert for those of you who had it, right? And you take them to the vet, and they go, well, we could keep them alive, but there's hemorrhaging inside, all the bones are broken, all this other stuff. I could keep them alive, but they would be eternally in misery. And they give you that horrible choice you never want to make. They go, or we can put them to sleep. I won't ask if you've had to go through that. It's gut-wrenching. You hate it. Everything in you recoils from it. But because you love them so much, you realize, I'm going to put aside my desire never to lose them so that they don't suffer forever and ever and ever. Anyone know what I'm talking about? By the way, this is a sneak peek of Revelation again. This is the exact same thing. God drops the fire not to put somebody in hell, but to prevent hell. You're like, what? You got to stay tuned for a Revelation series one day. He drops the fire to prevent hell, not put people in it. If Lot is any indication, nobody in Sodom is happy. Not even their wickedness satisfies them. He tries to offer them two girls, rape them for. He's like, nah, that's not even going to be enough. We won't even be happy. You know, Lot's like, oh, please let me hold on to. They're all miserable. It's nothing but suffering. There's no justice. There's no nothing. That place is a complete shambles. And God goes, I could keep them alive and they would suffer forever, or I can put them out of their misery. I like to say this isn't God just being like, ha-ha, fry. This is a mercy killing. There's nothing left to do. If there was any other way to do it, God would have done it. He's been delaying forever. That's why the outcry came to him. Would you do something already? He finally has to act. And I say this because I don't understand in Christendom. Right? We have people in the West, we get mad, and I know this is not a perfect example because I'll be honest, I love this country, but we are not God. We are not perfect in the way we execute things. But we have people that are not mad at all that in the face of Nazi Germany, America went and killed a whole lot of Germans to put it down. Does anyone know? And I'm not excusing it, I'm just saying it's an evil in this world. But no one's upset if the country in its unrighteousness stands up and says, that's so bad it has to be dealt with. But the moment God in the text of Scripture stands up and deals with a tribe or deals with something, we go, what an unloving, horrible God that he'd wipe out these people. Folks, if I pulled up to an intersection and I looked in the car next to me and there was a person in there punching a toddler in the face, if I just drove on, you guys would think I was a monster. If I got out and tried to go, that's exactly what a Christian should do. So why can I do that? Why can a fallen government do that? But when God steps in his righteousness, we go, he's a horrible murdering freak. I don't think it matches. I don't think that's fair. God's not going out trying to see who he can wipe out. It says God's not willing that any should perish. All right? He doesn't want to do this, but he's got no options left. They've appealed to him because there is no other recourse for justice. So now it is executed. And he's given them plenty of time to try and change, get out of it. They were wicked chapters ago. God didn't immediately show up and be like, fry this joint. Even with Abraham, he goes, I'm going to go examine. What? Like you can't figure out they're evil or not? He's just looking for any excuse, spare them. But he's left no choice. He has to put them to sleep. He has to put them down. Verse 26, a famous verse in this story. But his wife, that being Lot's wife, from behind him, looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. Now, I'm not going to go into great depth on this, because you're like, whoa, right? All I can say is she was definitely a salty individual. Anybody awake? Okay, just checking. I tried. I know, that was pretty bad. Here's the thing, though. I want you to notice a couple things about this one verse. Where is his wife? Behind him. Now, again, I don't want to read too much into this. Maybe she runs slower than him or whatever. But I think by what we see next in the same verse, it's hinting that she's purposely not going as fast. She's purposely not really in that much of a rush. And then it says she looked back, and I need to clear this up. It doesn't mean that she I feel the flames, what's going on? And turns to salt because she wants to see what's going on, right? Because if anyone remembers the felt boards when you were a kid, that's almost how it looked like. And Lot's wife turned to I want to see the fire, and turns into salt. When it says she glanced back, in the Hebrew, it does not mean she managed to, out of the corner of her eye, see the city, and God's like, disobedient, salt. When it says that she looked back, the Hebrew word here is gazing with longing intent. This isn't her glancing back at what's happening. It's a hesitation and a desire and a regret to be leaving. And here's another truth that we see in the Bible. God, pay close attention to this, God will take everyone to salvation, that would be happy with it. I'll say that again. God is going to save everyone, that would be happy being saved. She's miserable. I mean, Lot's miserable too. Before we blame her, he's doing the same thing. He just decides out of fear or whatever, he's going to keep going, right? I mean, where do you think maybe she learned that hesitation or that I like staying or no? I mean, he already hesitated in the house. I'm not going to go. She's doing the same thing. It's just, it reaches a point where even God's like, she will be miserable. No sense because she won't even, puts her out of her misery. Go on, verse 27. Now Abraham, this is key, it links us to the chapter before. Now Abraham arose early in the morning and went to the place where he had stood before God. You get the idea that he's not slept well. Maybe that he tossed and turned all night after his conversation with God in the previous chapter, right? You get the idea when it says that he went to the same place they had been speaking. You get the idea that the conversation is still in progress, that he's reflecting, that he's seeking understanding, right? It says he arose early And he went to the place where he stood before the Lord, and he looked down towards Sodom and Gomorrah and toward the land of the valley, and he saw, and behold, the smoke of the land ascended like the smoke of a furnace. He looks, and he sees the judgment has come. The whole valley's in flame. And it's interesting because you get the idea, I mean, what a poignant scene if it was a movie. Abraham standing there looking down into the valley, knowing he had just stood with God the day before, having a conversation when he had come to a realization that Sodom was done for. There was nobody righteous in there, not even his family. And he stands there and you almost feel the agony. Have you ever noticed how sometimes in a story nobody has to say anything? Oh, come on, that's like the movie Castaway. Tom Hanks said like 2 lines in the whole 2-hour movie, and we watched it and we're like, wow, he didn't say a thing, right? I think this would be the same thing. Abraham's standing there and he's just staring. And he's seeking understanding. He goes, okay, God, but why? I need to, how do you make this right? How does this make it right? I need to know. Now, spoiler alert, you're not going to get the answer in this chapter. But you are going to get the answer in another chapter, and here's the hint I'm going to give you. This phrase, Abraham arose early in the morning, it's repeated only one other time in Genesis. Yeah, chapter 22, when it says Abraham arose early in the morning to take his son up Moriah to sacrifice him. We're going to have to wait to get to that story to get the answer that Abraham is seeking here as to how God is going to make this right. How does this work? Why is this excusable? But that's coming. Now look at verse 29, key to this story. Thus it came about when God destroyed the cities of the valley that God remembered Lot. Is that what it said? No, what does it say? God remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow when he overthrew the cities in which Lot lived. It's an interesting turn of phrase. It has to remind you, the place Lot was living willfully, by choice. He didn't save Lot because Lot was righteous. Now, Lot is later called righteous, but Lot is called righteous in the same time that Abraham's called righteous and that he never doubted, and that David's called righteous even though he did. I mean, is anyone noticing this trend here? How do these people get called righteous when they are clearly losers? Well, that was a couple sermons ago. If you missed it, go to our YouTube. Look it up, right? But go to our website. But this is the thing. It's because it's God's record that's covering them in the end. And that should give you hope, because I'm so glad it's going to be God's record and not mine that I have to face. Right? Because my story, he remembered Abraham. Remember what we said last week? Oh, and by the way, this is the same exact phrase that happened in the flood story, the other destruction story. Does anyone remember in the middle of the flood story, in chapter 8 of Genesis, it said God remembered Noah. Not Noah remembered God, not Abraham remembered God, not Lot remembered God, God remembered them. It's God's, we should be impressed with God, not these characters. All right? God remembered Abraham. He's rescuing Lot not because Lot deserves to be rescued, but because Lot matters to his friend, and his friend is Abraham. He goes, friends do things for friends. I love Abraham. I mean, not that God doesn't love Lot, but follow me here. Lot's made his choice. He doesn't really want anything to do with God. It's going to get worse, but he goes, but I love Abraham. And don't tell me God couldn't sense in Abraham when they had the discussion the evening before, that afternoon before. Don't tell me he couldn't sense the hesitation when Abraham realized not even Lot would make it, when he cuts off at the 10. God knows what's on your heart. I love this about God. God looks and he goes, oh, that's going to just be too much for Abraham. Oh, that's going to hurt him too. Oh man, I got to find some way to do something nice for my friend. I'm going to, I don't know how he does. He doesn't do it on a phone, but right, he gets to the angels like, hey, I need you to get Lot. Yeah, I know he's going to resist. Drag him out if you have to. Yeah, fine, spare the seat. Just get him out. Right? I mean, this is an extraction team that doesn't want to leave. They're like, get him out. He remembered Abraham. Rescued Lot for his friend. Oh, some of you parents right now are even thinking about people you'd like God to rescue for you. Right? And you can't make their choices. He's not going to force your kids. He's not going to force your parents. He's not going to do whatever. But just never underestimate God. There's a lot of violence that happens in sexuality in our world today. Even in marriages, by the way. I can't tell you the amount of times as a pastor I realize even good people in the church, they're abusing one another sexually. There is evil out here in this world. And they're just further evidence of that devolving outcry of a sinful, selfish world that God had to step in and try and deal with. And now the appeal. If you've made it through this hard chapter, here's the appeal. There's an outcry then as there is now. Our world, I believe that outcry is growing and it is rising. And I say that as someone who loves people, and I love this country and all that, but I recognize that the Bible tells me the trend of the world is not heading well. And that doesn't mean I don't fight to try and slow that degradation down, but the outcry is getting worse. And I know it's getting worse because, if anything, the pandemic has shown me just how fast and just how bad it will get. There's a lot of anger out there. There's a lot of judgment out there. There's a lot of people we have no time to think about anybody but ourselves. That outcry is rising. And one day God will have to step in because he'll be left no choice. There will be no way to get justice. There'll be no way to get righteousness. There'll be no way to do anything in our world today. It's fast coming. And I'm not saying that to scare you, but I'm asking a question. Are you wanting to contribute to the outcry? I'm glad no hands popped up. This is between you and God. You need to think about this. In a world that is fast tearing itself apart, is there any Christian willing to say, I don't want to further contribute to the outcry? I need to actually, I don't know how else to say it. I'm not trying to be crude, but I need to pull my head out of my rear end and actually live like I follow God. Because some of us care more about masks and mandates than we do about his people and about the hurting and the suffering. And it's easy to feel morally superior over a piece of fabric or over some sexual minority in the country. But you have no right to feel superior when we are part of the outcry. And I'm saying that for myself. I'm selfish. I'm a jerk. Push comes to shove, I don't want to do something for somebody else. About me. I. That's the American way. Well, folks, that's a way, all right. It's not leading anywhere good. Do you have just enough of God not to be comfortable here, but just enough of the world? You're not comfortable with him either? Are you contributing to the outcry? That's my appeal. Do you want to be part of the outcry of compromise? Do you want to further contribute to the selfishness of this world? Or do you want to cry out to God and direct your outcry to him and then allow him to live selflessly through you to better the world for those around you in any way you can, for as long as you can, and take as many out with you as you can? Who wants to not contribute to the outcry, but outcry to God today? Abraham outcried to God in chapter 18, and God remembered Abraham. Lot contributed to the outcry, and he lost everything, even his own self-worth at the end of that story. Can you imagine when he found out? Friends, give yourselves to God. If there was ever a time to do it, it is now. Where are the people of God? Where are the children of Abraham? Because God remembered Abraham. And he will remember you. Just let him. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Henry, for bringing that word to us. It challenged me, challenged my heart, and I think it challenges all of us. And it's so beautiful how God leads songs, and how I hope I can get through, because now I'm emotional. Just moved by the Spirit of just the challenge of living that life. Because it is easy just to be judgmental or to be comfortable and not be out there and really having our heart just going out for those who can't speak for themselves and who need a human touch and a love. The song we're going to close with is really kind of a prayer, a praise, but it's just declaring that we're going to build our life on his love in the bridge. And in the chorus, it's like, Lord, just fill us with yourself and lead us with your love to those around us. So let that be our declaration today as we close with the song, and there'll be, I think, prayer after that as well in closing. But stand with me and let's just declare that praise and prayer to the Lord. worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Jesus, Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. We live for you. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none besides you. Open up my eyes and wonder and show me who you are, and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none besides you. Open up my eyes and wonder and show me who you are, and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. And I will build my life, and I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation, and I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none besides you. Open up my eyes and wonder and show me who you are, and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me.
Do you want God to fill your heart today so that you can lessen the outcry of this world? So that we can try and bring justice where there is none, hope where there is none, peace where there is none. Let it start with me, Lord. Start with me. Let us pray. Father, we thank you for the opportunity to search ourselves. We know it's not comfortable. It's not a comfortable story. It's not supposed to be a comfortable story. Because, Father, it's easy to point and laugh at the people in the story or say, oh, how gross, or what a horrible group of people, and then realize that we're just the same in our own way. We live in a world where it's no less different than Sodom, and it's not no different just because there's crowds of people doing unspeakable sexual things. It's because we all just care about ourselves. If left to ourselves, we only care about me, about I. Father, we don't want to be that people. We don't want to further bring misery to the lives of those around us. We want to be obedient to you. We want to submit to you. We want to bring hope and love and peace and healing into a world that is so desperate for it. Father, forgive us for the little bits of Sodom we keep trying to hold on to. Forgive us, I know, for the times even where I've begged you, can't I just have this tiny little... No, Father. Thank you that you're so merciful, that you're so patient. Father, make us willing to be willing to let you change our characters. May we make choices that say, no more with that, but for God. Father, thank you that you remembered Abraham. And thank you that you remember us. May we, as we leave this place, always remember you and give ourselves to you each day. May we be children of Abraham in a true sense. And may we make this community just that much better and lessen the outcry against it. Start with us. Do it in us, then do it through us, and cut it short in righteousness when we see you again very soon. We ask in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you for being here today, for making it through an admittedly difficult chapter. We look forward to seeing you next week. And until then, don't forget your children are right next door. They'll be happy to tell you what they did today. And I'll look forward to seeing you hopefully at the door on the way out. And we look forward to seeing you, if not during the week, at one of our several different ministries. Hopefully again next Saturday. Thank you so much.